The warship hung in the black void like a blade poised to strike. Commander Vara stood on the bridge of the Talon's edge, her crystalline carapace reflecting the cold light of distant stars. She was not one to be trifled with. Her reputation stretched across 7 systems as a warrior who had conquered planets and crushed rebellions with ruthless efficiency. Her scaled hands gripped the command console as her amber eyes scanned the holographic display before her. But today, the terror of the Outer Rim felt something she had not experienced in decades. Fear. Her daughters were missing. The twin hatchlings, barely 3 cycles old, had vanished from the secured nursery pod during the ship's routine patrol of the neutral zone. Vara's second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Court, had searched every corridor, every chamber, every maintenance shaft. Nothing. The security feeds showed only static at the critical moments, as if something had deliberately interfered with the systems. Vara's spines flared along her neck, a sign of barely contained rage. She had enemies, countless beings who would relish the opportunity to strike at her through her offspring. The Talon's edge had been locked down immediately. No one would leave until her daughters were found. The only variable, the only unknown factor, was the human. The Terran had come aboard 3 days prior, a cultural exchange officer assigned by the newly formed Human Alliance. Vara had protested the assignment, but the treaty required it. Humans were a strange species, soft-bodied and weak, yet they had somehow carved out a place among the stars, through sheer stubbornness and an unsettling lack of self-preservation instinct. This particular human was called James. He was unremarkable by human standards, of average height and build, with dark hair that never seemed to stay in place and eyes the color of Earth's oceans. He spent most of his time in the observation deck or the ship's small garden module, keeping to himself and offering polite greetings to crew members who largely ignored him. Vara did not trust him. She did not trust any human. They smiled too easily and spoke of peace while their history was written in the ashes of their own wars. "Bring the human to me," Vara commanded, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance of her species. "Now." Cork hesitated only a moment before nodding and departing the bridge. Vara's claws tapped against the metal console, each click echoing her mounting anxiety. If anything had happened to her daughters, if they had been harmed, she would tear this ship apart, bulkhead by bulkhead, until she found those responsible. When James entered the bridge flanked by 2 armed guards, he looked confused rather than frightened. That alone set Vara's instincts on edge. Any reasonable being would show fear in the presence of an enraged Corthan commander. "Commander Vara," James said, offering a slight bow. "How can I help you?" "My daughters are missing," Vara stated, moving toward him with deliberate steps. Her full height towered over the human, yet he did not flinch. "You are the only outsider aboard this vessel. Explain yourself." James blinked, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Your daughters are missing?" "Commander, I had no idea." "When did this happen?" 2 hours ago. They disappeared from a secured location. Vara's eyes narrowed. "You will submit to a full search and interrogation." "Of course," James agreed immediately. "Whatever you need. But, Commander, have you checked the environmental systems? Young children, even alien ones, tend to seek out warm, quiet places when they're scared." Vara paused. The suggestion was logical, though it rankled to take advice from a human. "The environmental systems have been scanned. Nothing was detected. With respect, your scanners might be calibrated for adult life signs," James offered carefully. "If your daughters are small and frightened, they might be hiding somewhere your equipment would overlook. I'd be happy to help search, if you'll allow it." Vara studied the human for a long moment. His body language showed no deception, no nervousness beyond what would be appropriate for the situation. Against her better judgment, she gave a curt nod. You will be accompanied by guards at all times. Understood. The search resumed with renewed focus on smaller spaces. James moved through the ship with surprising efficiency, checking behind panels and inside storage compartments that most crew members would have considered too small. Vara followed, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. It was James who noticed the ventilation grate in the recreation area was slightly ajar. "Commander," he called softly. "Over here." Vara approached, her heart hammering against her chest plates. James knelt beside the grate, tilting his head to listen. Then, impossibly, he began making soft clicking sounds, a crude approximation of the Korthan language of affection used with hatchlings. From within the vent came a tiny, answering chirp. Vara's breath caught. She dropped to her knees beside the human, her massive frame suddenly feeling clumsy and too large. "Lyra? Nessa?" Another chirp, this one unmistakably frightened. "They're scared," James said quietly. The vent probably amplified some noise from the ship and startled them. They crawled in to hide, and now they're too frightened to come out. "They must come out," Vara demanded, though her voice had lost its commanding edge. "It is not safe." "They're babies," James said gently. "They don't understand that. They just know they're scared." Before Vara could respond, James lay down on the floor and pulled off his outer uniform jacket. He folded it carefully and pushed it partially into the vent opening, creating a soft barrier. Then he positioned himself so that his chest was level with the opening and began making those clicking sounds again, mixing them with soft humming noises. "What are you doing?" Vara asked, bewildered. "Being non-threatening," James replied. "And warm. Humans have a higher body temperature than most species. If your daughters are cold and scared, they might be willing to come to a heat source." It was absurd. It was beneath the dignity of a commander to lie on the floor of her own ship, watching a human attempt to coax her children out of a ventilation shaft with body heat and nonsense sounds. Yet Vara found herself waiting, barely breathing, as minutes ticked by. Then she saw movement in the shadows. Two small shapes emerged slowly from the vent, their silver scales dulled by dust and fear. Lyra came first, her golden eyes wide and cautious. She was followed by her sister Nessa, slightly smaller and braver despite her size. They approached James with the hesitant curiosity of all young creatures encountering something new. James remained perfectly still, continuing his gentle humming. When Lyra reached out a tiny claw to touch his face, he smiled but did not move. "Hello there," he whispered. "It's okay. You're safe." To Vara's absolute shock, both hatchlings suddenly scrambled forward onto James's chest, curling against him like they would against their mother. They chirped contentedly, their small bodies already relaxing in the warmth. James carefully wrapped his arms around them, supporting their weight but not restraining them. He looked up at Vara with an expression of pure relief. "Found them," he said simply. Vara could not speak. Her throat had closed around words that would not come. She watched as this soft, weak human cradled her daughters, with a gentleness she had not thought possible from his species. The hatchlings, who should have been terrified of an alien creature, instead burrowed against him with complete trust. "They're okay," James assured her. "Just scared and tired. The ventilation system probably made some loud noise, and they panicked." Slowly, carefully, Vara reached out. James shifted slightly, allowing her to scoop her daughters into her own arms. They chirped in protest at being moved from their warm spot, but settled quickly against their mother's familiar scales. Vara held them close, feeling their rapid heartbeats against her chest. They were safe. They were whole. The relief was so overwhelming, she nearly staggered. "Thank you," she managed, the words foreign and uncomfortable. "Human, you have my gratitude." James sat up, brushing dust from his uniform. "No thanks needed, Commander." I'm just glad they're all right." He paused, then added with surprising boldness, "They're beautiful, by the way. You must be very proud." Vara looked down at her daughters, then back at the human. Something shifted in her understanding of this species. They were not merely soft and weak. There was a different kind of strength in beings who would lie on cold floors and offer warmth to frightened children, not their own. "I misjudged you," Vara admitted. "I assumed the worst of your presence here." Jane smiled, at easy expression humans wore so naturally. "I get that a lot, actually. Humans are kind of the new kids in the galactic neighborhood. We're still figuring out how to fit in." "Perhaps," Vara said slowly, "you fit better than you realize." In the days that followed, the crew of the Talon's Edge witnessed something unprecedented. Their fierce commander, the terror of 7 systems, could occasionally be found in the observation deck with the human exchange officer. They would sit in companionable silence while Lyra and Nessa played between them, the hatchlings having decided that James was an acceptable member of their small family unit. When asked about it by her second-in-command, Vara simply stated that the human had proven himself worthy of trust. Court, wisely, did not press the matter further. James, for his part, sent a report back to Earth, noting that cultural exchange was proceeding better than expected. He included an image of himself with 2 small alien children sleeping on his chest, there